And so I'm glad for this opportunity to talk with you and have you share with me how Gen AI can support active learning. But we're going to first of all start with pedagogy. So before we jump in, I like to get a sense of the room. So I am going to launch a poll. So great. Looks like we have a good number of folks who regularly use it. And we do have some folks rarely are unsure. So great. So everybody should get an opportunity to at least hear about the foundational pedagogy for active learning before we dive into generative AI. So I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. Okay, so let's get started. So here's what we'll focus on today. First, we'll look at the principles of active learning and why they support student engagement and deeper learning. Next, we'll explore practical ways generative AI can support active learning through activities such as simulations, interactive feedback, and adaptive tutorials. And then finally, we'll consider how to incorporate AI enhanced active learning strategies into courses and programs. So my goal is not to focus on a specific AI tool. Instead, we'll focus on how AI can support intentional instructional design and meaningful learning experiences. So active learning isn't about doing more. It's about thinking more deeply. So at the core, active learning involves students doing something and thinking about what they are doing. It emphasizes both action and reflection, not just participation. Students can be busy without engaging deeply. They can complete tasks without examining ideas. So, active learning requires intentional opportunities for students to analyze, evaluate, apply, or create, to work with ideas rather than simply receiving them. And especially in an online environment, that level of engagement doesn't happen automatically, it has to be designed. So before we talk about AI, we need clarity on this distinction. Active learning is about how students think, how much, not how much they do. So let's look at the difference in course design. So as you can see on the left side are structures that are common in online courses. Students watch, read, complete, submit. And these activities aren't necessarily bad. They do serve a purpose, but they primarily position students as recipients of information or completers of tasks. On the right side, we see a shift. Instead of just watching a lecture, students apply concept to a scenario. Instead of only reading, they analyze a real world example. And instead of selecting an answer, they evaluate a solution and justify their reasoning. And instead of submitting work once, they revise based on feedback. The difference isn't the presence of activity, it's the level of engagement with ideas. Active design requires students to work with content, to interpret, compare, critique, or refine. And that level of engagement has to be structured. That's why designing strong active learning activities takes being intentional. So active learning matters because it changes how students process information. When students analyze, evaluate, or apply concepts, they develop deeper understanding, not just short-term recall. It also supports transfer of knowledge. Students are more likely to apply what they learn in new contexts beyond a quiz or exam. Active learning promotes sustained engagement. Students are cognitively involved, not just completing tasks. And in online courses, especially asynchronous ones, structured active learning creates opportunities for meaningful interaction between students and with instructors. When activities require analysis, feedback, revision, or discussion, they naturally support regular and meaningful engagement and interaction. And that level of engagement doesn't happen by accident. It involves aligning activities with learning outcomes, being clear about the level of thinking we expect, and building in structure where expectations must be explicit. And it takes time to think through alignment, time to draft clear instructions, and time to refine and adjust. We want deeper engagement and meaningful interaction, but thoughtful design requires attention and energy. And that can be challenging when we're trying to balance so many competing priorities. That's where generative AI can become useful, not as a shortcut, but as a design partner. AI can support that drafting and refinement process while we maintain alignment, rigor, and instructor presence. So before we open any AI tool, we need a design lens. It's easy to begin with the technology, to ask what it can generate, but a pedagogy first approach asks different questions. What are students supposed to learn? And that starts with the learning outcome. Then, what level of thinking is required? Are we asking students to analyze, evaluate, create? How will students actually engage with the task? Is the activity structured in a way that supports that meaningful engagement? And where does instructor feedback or facilitation occur? Because active learning depends on instructor presence, not just well written prompts. These questions anchor that design process. AI should respond to these questions and not replace them. These guiding questions translate into 4 principles that help keep pedagogy first. The first principle is about starting in the right place. Instructional purpose comes first. The tool comes second. Clarity about the learning outcome and the level of thinking shapes the task. AI can assist with drafting and refining, but it follows the instructional goal. That leads us to principle number 2. The second principle is about the level of thinking built into the task. Activity alone does not ensure meaningful engagement. The verbs used in a prompt signal the level of thinking expected. If that level is not specified, tasks often remain at a more basic level. And even when the level of thinking is clear, that is not the end of the work. The third principle is about review. So, yes, AI generated drafts may appear complete, but alignment with learning outcomes, clarity of expectations, and the level of thinking still require instructor evaluation. The tool produces text. The instructor determines whether it truly works. And finally, the last principle is about keeping it realistic. Integrating AI does not require a full course redesign. Strengthening a single activity, clarifying structure or expectations is often enough. Small refinements are more realistic and more sustainable than sweeping changes. So, with these principles in mind, let's see how this plays out in practice. Generative AI can help create case studies and simulations that require students to analyze situations and apply concepts. It can provide immediate feedback and opportunities for revision, helping your students reflect on and improve their work. It can also support interactive tutorials and guided practice, allowing students to explore concepts and receive explanations tailored to their needs. And it can support collaborative learning by helping students brainstorm ideas, consider multiple perspectives, and engage in discussion. The goal isn't to use AI because it's available. The goal is to use it when it helps create those opportunities for students to think, interact, and learn. So let's look at a prompt template that can help guide this design process. So here's a prompt template that I use when designing active learning activities with generative AI. And so first you'll notice that we start with the context, the course level. Is it undergraduate, graduate, course name or discipline? Is it nursing? Is it biology? Is it psychology? Context matters. AI outputs improve when we clarify who the learners are and where this activity lives. Next, we include the learning outcome, and this is a critical part of the prompt. We are not asking AI to create a task in isolation. We are connecting it to a clearly articulated learning outcome. This reinforces our first principle: pedagogy leads, technology assists. Then we explicitly provide a cognitive level, such as apply, analyze, evaluate, or create. If we don't specify that cognitive level, AI often defaults to a surface level task, like providing you something that's going to ask students to summarize or identify something. We must name that level of thinking that we want. We also ask for clear instructions and an estimated time. Clarity and structure support student success. So including 2 or 3 guiding questions ensures that the activity prompts higher order thinking rather than vague participation. If the activity is collaborative, we ask the AI to define student roles. That helps prevent unstructured group work and clarifies expectations. And then finally, we explicitly ask for alignment with the learning outcome. That reminder signals to the AI and to us that alignment is not optional. So this template reflects our design principles. It keeps instructional intent in your hands while using AI as a drafting and refinement prompt. So now let's see the template fully built out. So here's an example of a psychology course, introductory psychology course for asynchronous online in an asynchronous online environment. So you'll notice that the learning outcome is measurable and analysis based. So students must analyze how psychological theories explain real world behavior. Then we explicitly require analysis. This prevents the AI from defaulting to summary level tasks. Then we ask for clear instructions, a defined timeline, guiding questions, defined roles for students if this happens to be a collaborative activity that Gen AI generates, and strong alignment with the learning outcome that's provided. So in other words, we're not just asking AI to come up with an activity. We're giving it clear expectations for what we want students to actually do. So here's an example of what the AI might generate from the prompt we just reviewed. So notice the students are not simply recalling information in this activity or summarizing a theory. Instead, they're applying course concepts to a real-world case and comparing how different psychological theories explain the behavior. The guiding questions help focus students on analysis by asking them to examine assumptions, explanations, and similarities and differences between theories. We also see some structure built into the activity, including an estimated time and optional group roles. So at first glance, this looks like a solid active learning activity. Is aligned with the learning outcomes. It requires students to engage with the course concepts, and it encourages discussion and analysis. But as instructional designers and educators, our work doesn't stop when the AI generates that draft. The next step is to review the activity and determine what revisions might strengthen the instruction, expectations, and alignment. So let's look at how we might refine this activity before we use it with our students. So here you'll notice the core activity remains the same. Students are still analyzing the case using two psychological theories. What changes are the expectations. First, I added a suggested word range. That helps clarify the scope of the task and provides students with a clearer sense of what's expected. Second, I ask students to compare the explanation using specific course concepts. This strengthens the connection between the activity and the course content. Third, I provide more structure for the peer response by asking students to identify one similarity and one difference between the analysis. So that encourages a more meaningful response than simply agreeing or disagreeing with a classmate. These are relatively small revisions, but they can make a significant difference in terms of clarity, engagement, and alignment for the students. So the goal isn't to completely redesign what the AI generated for the activity. It's just simply about taking that generated content, that draft, and using our expertise to strengthen it before students ever see it. And that's where instructional design and instructor expertise remain essential. We've walked through an example from beginning to end. Now let's try an example together. So, this is your opportunity in chat. Let me check my time real quick. Oh, good on time. In chat, I would like for you to share three things. Course level, either undergraduate, graduate, a course or discipline, a learning outcome, and then a cognitive level. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Just think about a course you either teach, you support, or have worked with before or recently. And then I'll select one of those examples from chat, and then we'll build that activity together and then run it through an AI tool. So I'll give you a little while for that activity. So in the chat, think about a course that you teach, you support, or that you work with recently, and then provide a course level, undergraduate, graduate, course or discipline, nursing, biology, psychology, a learning outcome, a cognitive level, like apply, analyze, evaluate, or create. And I will look for those in chat. And I did see a couple of questions come in. I'm going to go ahead and address those while you type in. When I was on the passive slide and the active side, the question was, is there space for both? And the answer is yes. And again, you would go back to your course learning outcomes, um, take a look at your assessments, making sure those assessments are aligned to the learning outcomes, and then think about your activities, your student engagement. How can they engage with that material, interact meaningfully with the content so you can have both? You may have a discussion, and then you may also have some other type of interactive activity where they practice something that you taught them, for example. And then another question, do you usually refer to Bloom's for these cognitive levels? Definitely. And are there other sources you can lend to faculty? Okay, so I will see if I can find some resources too before the webinar is over. Let's see. Going through. So courses are coming in: graduate level political science, comparative politics. Okay, let's see. I see American history discovery. There's a biology course. Levels. Let's see. Introduction to web design. That one may be interesting. I'm gonna grab that one. Okay, if you haven't typed anything in, feel free to continue typing in. I'm gonna go to my text editor so I can pull this information into the template. Okay, so hopefully on your screen, you see this prompt template, and this is the example that I'm choosing: undergraduate course level, introduction to web design. In the learning outcome, by the end of the course, the students will successfully design a web page using HTML. So I'm just going to grab this stuff and I'm going to put it into our template area. We have undergraduate courses, web design, and create. Okay, so let's go to ChatGPT. So now on your screen, okay, so now we see ChatGPT. Great. Okay, so let me go ahead and paste that in. I'm just going to increase this a little. So we are asking ChatGPT, design an active learning activity for an undergraduate web design course. Learning outcome is design a web page using HTML. The activity should require students to create. And then we're telling it those, asking for some guiding questions, estimated time, clear instructions, give students role if it's collaborative, and make sure that the alignment is there with the learning outcome. And let's hit send prompt. So as we take a look at what's produced, I want you to think about what's missing, what's good. Uh-oh, sorry, y'all. Uh, oh, too many screens going on. Okay, are we still seeing the Chat GPT?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. Okay, so Chat GPT is just recalling what we told it here. Build a purposeful web page. That title of the activity may not necessarily be clear to students what is meant by purposeful. Let's take a look at activity overview. So students would create a simple, well-structured web page for a real or fictional organization, event, personal portfolio, or campus resource. Okay, the activity emphasizes using HTML to organize that content. So again, it's using purpose for, probably would kind of define that for students, but it's given an estimated time of 45 to 60 minutes. Here are some instructions for the students. It wants 3 major sections: introduction, service, schedule, at least one heading, at least one list link. Okay. Students may work in groups of 3. So here's the optional collaboration part. And then it specified what role each person would play. Somebody will be a content planner, one will be an HTML developer, and then a quality reviewer. And then here are those guiding questions for reflection. And then it tells us that this activity does align with the outcome, because students are not only practicing that HTML tag in isolation, but they're going to be using that HTML that they learned throughout the course to design and create that actual web page. So in the chat, what's your take on this generative AI response? So do you think it's usable? Usable with edits? Is anything missing? And you don't have to teach that web design course. Just kind of look at some of the main words and see, oh, well, yeah, this possibly could work. So just quickly let me know in the chat. Let's see. Somebody says a decent starting point, not specific enough to guide the design. So students could use some examples. Okay. Let's see what else. It depends on how much students already know, definitely. What prior knowledge did they have coming into the course? What did they learn up to this point that they're being asked to build this particular web page? And let's say somebody say, I would say group of 3 is great, I think. It popped up on me. Oh, but they all need to be each of those roles. Okay, that makes sense. Just modifies to personalized learning. Okay, just modifications. Okay, so let's say modify, if I can spell correctly. Thank goodness for Grammarly. Modify this activity for personalized learning, and let's see what happens. And again, we could have gave it more details, but for the sake of the webinar and time, I'm just giving it some basic information. So let's see what changed. Web page. Okay, it took out the group activity. Create a single page. Okay, choose one of the following personalized pathways, career pathways. You just interested in creating is a campus community pathway, business. Okay. Feels more like a high school level, but that's because I was a web developer for 19 years. Okay. Students select one level based on. So the idea here is it's giving some different pathways, and within those pathways, some challenge levels. So foundation, developing, advanced. And so it's giving us a little more to work with here. And then here's a reflection, exit ticket. And then again, it's verifying that it does align with learning outcomes. So that simple prompt template allowed this particular AI, ChatGPT, to quickly generate some type of draft that we could work from. and I saw a message pop up. Could it include an example? Let's see. Can you include an example? And a lot of this I might have asked in one prompt, but it's good to have a back and forth conversation. So here's a student facing example. Okay. Okay, about me. Gave us some example HTML, major sections to get a student an idea of what to start from. May could be workable. Okay. Any questions at this point as I transfer back to the PowerPoint slide? So as we wrap up the webinar, just wanted to revisit this design cycle. So we started with the learning outcome. We identified the level of thinking that we want students to engage in. Then we use AI to generate a draft activity. But remember, that process didn't stop there. The next idea was to review, or the next part of the process was to review that output and then consider, although ChatGPT told us that it aligns with the learning outcome, but that's where our expertise comes into play. And we can decide, yes, does it really align with it? Is this really the direction I want to go with the activity? Do I need to continue the conversation with the AI so that I can get something better or something usable? So that's a cycle. So the technology helps us generate possibilities. But then the instructional design work happens when we start reviewing what it provided to us. So the goal isn't not to let the AI drive that design process. The goal is to use AI to support a design process that is already rooted in those learning outcomes, cognitive engagement, and sound instructional practice. So, as we think about integrating AI into our work, the next question becomes, when does AI actually add value? And so, as you take a look at this slide, deciding when AI adds value. It adds value when it strengthens alignment with our learning outcomes, when it helps clarify what students are supposed to apply, analyze, evaluate, create, when they are supposed to do something that's meaningful for engagement. It adds value when it increases cognitive engagement, not just having students simply recall information, but from recall to evaluation. It adds values when it clarifies instructions and expectations. And it also adds value when it saves time drafting without reducing rigor. But on the other side of this, reconsider AI when it begins to replace meaningful instructor engagement, interaction with your students. Active learning depends on facilitation, feedback, and presence. So we should also reconsider it when it lowers cognitive demand. We want to shift the recall thinking of students to the more evaluating or analyzing shift for students. So we must think also about access and equality as well. If an activity depends on a tool that students may not have equal access to, you might want to rethink the design of that particular activity. So the goal is not to use AI everywhere. It is to use it where it meaningfully strengthens instructional and intentional design. So the tool matters less than the actual thinking behind using the tool. And for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of skip this quick reflection. And then I will go on to contact information and then ask if there are any questions as we wrap up.